What's up, conscious family? So good to see you back. Make sure you grab your pencil, grab your notebook, because this is the last part of the mindfulness series. What's up, conscious family? Welcome to Conscious Content Learning. Let's explore, engage, and create together as we enter a curriculum of inclusion, activism, creativity, and passion for education. Okay, conscious family, so let's get straight to it. So I have really enjoyed the mindfulness series. I've got a great amount of feedback talking about how it's helpful. They love the part 2 toolkit where we talked about the RARE acronym. If you do not know what I'm talking about, go ahead, go back to those videos on my YouTube channel, and again, don't forget to subscribe. So today is the last part 3. We're going to talk about resources, and then I have a few questions that some of my followers via Instagram wanted me to answer. So let's first things first get into it with our resources. I wrote down some great websites. Of course, I'm guessing there are many websites out there, but these are the ones that I found to be very helpful when in my classroom in trying to make sure I am doing culturally responsive teaching. So first things first, Abolitionist Teaching Network. It's a great website. It gives you a full guide for racial justice, how to be an abolitionist teacher, what to focus on for social and emotional learning. It also helps you create that space for providing substance and creating leaders. You want to know how to create those future leaders in your classroom? This is the website for you. Another website, love. Black Lives Matter at School. This one gives you a full link. Listen to me closely. A full link to the Google Drive that has it for elementary, middle, and high school. Full thought out lesson plans, projects, field trips, anything you can think of that helps you focus on a week of action, a year of purpose, and a lifetime of practice. What a motto. Why wouldn't you want to reference that? Make sure you write that down. I will also provide the link. Continuing on, not just websites. I want you all to think outside of the box. It's not just constantly about going by the script. In order to be a conscious teacher, you have to be able to think, okay, if I'm not just referencing these resources online, what other things are out there? The main thing, books. Add books that reflect your students, and get this, and their community. So that means find books about the city of Detroit, if that's where you live. Find books about Black Lives Matter. Find books about Asian Americans. Find books about Jewish cultures. Different things. Who is in your classroom? What does your classroom community look like? And then what does the community outside of school look like? Get books that they can reference and they can say, oh, this reminds me of this corner up the street. This reminds me of my family back at home. Oh, they're talking about this dish that reminds me of something that is near and dear to my heart and my culture. When kids see that in the text and they see that your teacher, the educator, is interested, it creates that safe space and creates that bond that you all want to have in your classroom. Continuing, there are also more books that you want to find out that are talking about international cultures. So other things that are not just locally that they're used to, but things beyond. Going on with that window concept. Not just the mirror at the face value, but that window concept. Learning about other cultures beyond themselves. So here there's a book called A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park. I love it. It's about the Nile River and about a young girl. It talks about 2 stories simultaneously. So you learn about a boy and his journey in the Sudan, and then you also learn about a girl along the Nile River and how she has to travel to get water. All of that. I love it. I used it for my 7th graders. Great text, great thing for a resource. I dare you to check it out. Also, American Born. This is by Jean Lu Yang, which is a comic book, which is awesome. So, a different way of reading. Another way for your students to look at things beyond themselves, learning about different cultures. It's about a young boy who's learning the life and about his American culture, as well as an American Chinese boy. Great resource as well. Okay, one thing that I really want you all to focus on too is just because when I say look at who is in your classroom, what is the classroom makeup? Let's say you have all white students. You're not going to pick majority all white textbooks. No, you're going to add in that variety. So look into other things, find books on different websites. Ask your students, what do they read at home? I bet you'll come and end up creating an entire new and fun library in your classroom. Continuing on, I want you all to think about the field trips. Field trips, I think, are so forgotten when we're in our classroom. We think about all this literature and things that we can read. We think about the discussions that we have, but what better experience to create discussion than having the students actually go somewhere and be and live that experience out. So that way they can bring more things to that conversation and you have all experienced it together. I'm in the city of Detroit, so Charles H. Wright Museum is a great place for my students to go. Learn, read, go on their own. Sometimes if you have older students, put them into groups. Have them veer off. If you want to, add a worksheet. Not something that just answers questions verbatim, but more thought-provoking questions, intentional questions. What did you feel going through? What did you notice? What is something that you want to learn more about? What voices were heard? What perspectives did you see? Go there. Anytime you go with an intentional field trip, it's bound to be great. Continuing, think about projects. Think about projects in the beginning of the school year, all about me. If you have not yet learned who your students are or the community that they are from, a great way is an All About Me project. When they share their cultural backgrounds, any information that they know about their family, and have them present in any way, shape, or form. If they want to do it in a PowerPoint presentation for your older students, if they want to share a book, if they want to draw pictures, if they want to have a home video and record their own little talk show all about me. It's all up to you how creative you want to be, but what better way to get to know your students than to have them do it themselves. Continuing on, teachers, I have not forgotten about you as well. There are more teacher books. Let's talk about For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood by Christopher Emdin. It's a great read, short read, but it also gives you strategies and talks about that uncomfortable conversation that it is for you non-African American educators or people of color out here who are teaching those students who live in the hood or maybe do not look like you. Great read, great resource. Remember, we always want to further our education. If you don't know where to start, find a place to start. Here's the book. I'm giving it to you right here. Another great book and resource is Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hamden. Amazing read as well. It tells you about culturally responsive teaching, how to implement those strategies, how to ask those intentional questions, those thought-provoking questions, and how to create that safe space and discussion. And then, friends, of course, I just want to talk about two other options. There's another book called Wild Hundreds, and it's a book full of poetry, but it's poetry scenes that describe urban areas, and it's by Nate Marshall. He's an amazing poet, and he just describes each scene, and that's another way for you to get your students to discuss, learn about different areas, and then also see if some of the poems resonate with them. You want to get creative. You don't want to leave out anything. And then also, I think a lot of times we forget about the power of social media. The main thing is, if you have a social media of some sort, maybe you have a teacher Instagram, an educator Instagram, you follow me, people like me on YouTube, go ahead and make sure you're following intentional pages that reflect the teaching that you do or that you want to do. This is a great resource, great thing. So that way when you're scrolling and you're doing that mindless scrolling, you're actually doing a mindful activity, because next thing you know, you're scrolling on resources that you can implement in your classroom. So go ahead and follow some pages. Of course, you could follow mine, Conscious Content Learning _ LLC, of course. But also there are other great educators out there that have awesome resources for culturally responsive teaching. And lastly, I just want to say, have fun with it. Don't think that you have to stick to a script. I talked about this in part 1 and part 2. This is something that you have to learn how to do, something that becomes a consistent habit. Once you start, once you add these things to your toolkit, it becomes natural. Next thing you know, you start thinking of activities on your own that relate to things that you want to implement in your safe space as a conscious teacher. Remember, don't be so hard on yourself. Take it day by day. Reach out. Have that community where if you see other teachers, have that conversation with them. Bring up that conversation of, how are you implementing culturally responsive teaching in your classroom? Do you mind if we share some resources? Hey, do you mind if we kind of co-plan together? Can I see what you're doing for this month? Can I see what you're doing weekly? Because remember, we want to stray away from those key month activities. We want to make this a full year thing. So lastly, as promised, we're going to go into our Q&A section. I have 2 amazing and pretty loaded questions that I told my followers that I would answer. So before I get into that, I just want to make sure that you all know to go back to the first 2 videos if you are unsure about a few things, especially where to begin. I answer that right off bat in part 1. And then, of course, the approach and where to start in part 2. So part 3, of course, is resources and Q&A. So I've given you all the resources that I use. I've hopefully motivated you to go out and look these up and maybe find resources of your own. And then now let's go into some Q&A. Okay, so let's get into our first question of the day. It says, what did Black History Month look like for you during your K-12 experience as a student? Great question. For me personally, K through 8, I went to a Catholic school. And Black History Month wasn't a thing. I don't even remember acknowledging. No, wow. I don't even remember acknowledging anyone in Black History Month. The only time we ever talked about a Black hero per se to them was Martin Luther King Day, and we had that day off. So that was the only reason why they told us. It was because they told us not to come to school. So that's also another reason why I started Conscious Content Learning, because issues like that, problems like that in the school where we think that that's okay. We don't acknowledge other important people other than the white heroes that we were taught in American history. Black history is American history, and we need to talk about it. And so yeah, that was my experience. When I went to high school, I went to, for my first 2 years, I went to a predominantly white school. It was less than 1% Black students, so we didn't talk about it at all. I was even told by my principal that we were lucky as African Americans to be here because we used to clean their houses. I cannot make this up. This was my experience. So again, another flag that pushed me to do this, to start this business, because I don't want students to go through what I went through. I want them to see something different. And I don't care if I have to reach them via social media before I can get this curriculum into schools. I want to reach them somehow. Because specifically my Black and brown students need someone to give them a voice. Because I was once that voiceless student. So yes, thank you for asking. The second question says, how can I start a conversation with my colleagues about this, and where do I start? So I'm going to encourage you for the where do I start to definitely go back to part 1 and 2, where I really help you have these conversations. And again, that RARE, our Rare Kit Toolkit, that acronym to really help you reflect, address, and all of that good stuff. But definitely how to start the conversation with your colleagues. I think it's just like any other conversation, right? Definitely taking that step of bravery to say, just like anything, you discuss regular lesson plans. So this is content that should be in the lesson plan. Starting that off with, hey, are you doing anything about, are you talking about any cultures in your classroom? What books do you have that reflect your students? And I mean, if they come to you, maybe on the defensive side, maybe think about approaching it in a different way. Maybe showing them something or an idea that you have that you know is a conscious way of teaching and bringing it to them. Hey, did you ever think about doing something like this? Sparking that conversation. Maybe they may not take it well that first time. They may be thrown off, but I promise you it's now on their mind. And then continuing that, bringing it to your administration by saying, hey, I've been talking with my colleagues and we noticed that certain curriculum like the one that I'm trying to add in the classroom is not there. So what do you think about that? Are you okay with maybe making it mandatory that we all try to be more culturally responsive in our teaching? And I know a lot of people talk about that pushback in the classroom, but remember it starts with you. And if you take that first step, maybe it didn't work that one time or that one day with your principal and they weren't as receptive, just in that one day, it may sit with them. Sometimes those uncomfortable conversations, people have to sit with for a few days and come back until they get comfortable. But don't stop. So continue. I think that it starts small and then that's how it turns out to something big. Just having that one-on-one conversation with someone can then trickle to another colleague in the school, might get to the school counselor. Have this conversation with all of your colleagues, not just the teachers. So again, talking about your school community. Your school community is not just made up of administrators, not just teachers. It's made up of the cafeteria woman or man. It's made up of the school counselor. It's made up, of course, your students and your parents. So make sure you involve everyone. Thank you. That was our last question. Thank you to those of you who have submitted questions. I urge you to continue. If you would like to submit more questions, definitely you can submit them in the comment area or go ahead and submit them via Instagram, again at consciouscontentlearning_LLC. Thank you so much for going on this mindfulness series journey with me. I hope this was beneficial. Again, I thank you all for joining me on this YouTube channel. Do not forget to like and subscribe. And remember, each day is a new day to become a conscious teacher. Thank you guys and see you next time.